In this crazy age of AI, everybody is scrambling to find that next big competitive advantage. But what if the secret sauce, the real advantage, isn't what we all think it is? All right, let's dive in and really separate the hype from the reality. We've all heard this a million times, right? Data is the new oil. And honestly, when you look at behemoths like Google, Apple, and Microsoft, who have a combined value of over $7 trillion, it's kind of hard to argue. They've figured out how to turn the data they collect into pure gold. But that leads to the big question, doesn't it? If data is so valuable, why are so many other companies drowning in information but absolutely starved for actual insights? The truth is, just having data isn't the same thing as having an advantage. Not even close. And that's the first major idea we need to tackle. We have to shift our thinking from just big data to what's really important, the right data. And believe me, there's an incredible story from history that makes this point crystal clear. Okay, so picture this. It's World War II. The Allied forces are trying to figure out how to make their bomber planes tougher. So they start analyzing the planes that actually make it back from their missions, looking to see where they're getting hit the most. And the logic seems totally sound, right? The planes come back, and they've got bullet holes all over the wings, the tail, the main body. So naturally, the engineers are like, aha, these are the vulnerable spots. We need to add more armor right there. On the surface, it seems like a complete no-brainer. Reinforce the damaged areas. But just take a second, think about it. Can you spot the massive flaw in their logic? And boom, there it is. The answer was a hard no. The most important data wasn't on the planes that came back, it was on the planes that didn't. The returning planes proved they could take hits to the wings and tail and still fly. The ones getting shot down were the ones getting hits in the places with no bullet holes on the survivors, places like the engine or the cockpit. This is a perfect textbook example of something called survivorship bias. You're making a huge mistake by only looking at the survivors because the most critical information is with the ones that didn't make it. It was completely invisible to them. So the lesson here for any business is absolutely profound. Don't just start with a giant pile of data and ask, so, what can we do with this? No, you have to start with the business problem you need to solve or the decision you have to make, and then you go find the right data to answer that question. You know, this same kind of grounded, clear-headed thinking applies to AI too. It gets talked about like it's some kind of magic wand, but the reality is way more specific and way more practical. See, the AI we have today is what we call artificial narrow intelligence. That narrow part is key. It means an AI can be an absolute superhero at one very specific thing. Think of AlphaGo. It can crush the best human Go player on the planet, but you can't ask it to take that knowledge and play even a beginner's game of chess. It's just not how it works. We are still decades, maybe even centuries away from the kind of super smart AI you see in the movies. Now, this is where it gets really interesting from strategy perspective. When you're using AI, you almost always face this big trade-off. Do you need explainability or do you need accuracy? Do you need to know why something is happening or do you just need to predict what is going to happen? For example, if you're in HR trying to figure out why people are quitting, you need the why. You need an explainable model. But if you're in finance just trying to forecast next quarter's budget, you probably just want the most accurate number possible and you don't really care how the model got there. And all of this brings us to the real heart of the matter, the core framework of this whole explainer. The true lasting advantage doesn't come from just owning things. It comes from building capabilities. Think about it like this. Assets are the what. It's your raw data, your fancy algorithms, your brand recognition. They're valuable for sure, but they're also kind of passive. Capabilities, on the other hand, are the how. They are the active skills, the processes, the culture your organization uses to actually turn those assets into real value. It's the difference between owning a pile of lumber and being a master carpenter who can build a beautiful house with it. So what do these crucial capabilities actually look like? Well, it's the whole shebang. It's the technical stuff, like data curation and governance to make sure your data is actually clean and trustworthy. But it's also the strategic and human stuff, like building a real data-led mindset in your management team and knowing how to hire the right people. It's about mastering the entire pipeline, from raw data all the way to a smart business decision. Okay, I know this can all sound a little bit abstract, so let's look at a real-world company that is absolutely crushing it by putting all of this into practice. So let me introduce you to Taylor Brands.
What they realized was that something like 90% of the market for branding services, think small businesses, startups, entrepreneurs, was completely ignored by traditional agencies because they were just way too expensive.
And when I say expensive, I'm not kidding. To get a decent logo and some brand assets from a traditional agency, you could easily be looking at $50,000 or more. That's just a non-starter for most new businesses.
Now look at this. Taylor Brands comes along and offers a premium subscription for just over $10 a month. I mean, come on, that is pure, unadulterated disruption. They're not even trying to compete with the big agencies, they're creating a whole new market that those agencies literally can't afford to serve.
So you have to be asking, how on earth do they do that? Well, this is where their capabilities come in. They use clever studies to figure out your design tastes. Then they use machine learning to scan millions of successful logos to see what works. And finally, they use a type of AI called GANs, which are amazing at creating new images to generate totally unique brand assets just for you, automatically in minutes.
The result is just genius. It's a new business model that takes the strengths of the old guard, their expensive, hands-on, human-centered creative process, and turns those very strengths into a weakness. They simply can't compete at this scale or this price.
Okay, so let's bring all this home. If there's one single thing you take away from all of this, what should it be?
The bottom line is this. The real, sustainable advantage isn't the asset itself. It's not the data. It's not the AI algorithm. It is the deep organizational capability to start with a real business problem and know how to connect it to the right data and the right tools to get it solved. That is the true engine of value.
And so I'll leave you with this one question to think about. Take a hard look at your own organization, your own team. Are you just collecting assets, piles of data, fancy tools? Or are you actively, intentionally building the capabilities that create a real, defensible, competitive advantage?